morning, and welcome back to another episode of the Red Chip Poker Podcast. I'm your host, James Splitsuit Sweeney, joined by Chris Warren. Chris, how you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good. Feeling good.
Excellent. So I want to kind of talk a little bit about feeling a little bit when it comes to poker and playing poker, and talk about it from kind of the performance side of things. The emotional part of this game is pretty darn important, to say the least. So I wanted to chit-chat about that today. That good for you?
Sounds great.
Excellent. So you and I have been playing poker for a long, long time. We've played online, we've played live for, various reasons at one point or another, playing professionally, semi-professionally, recreationally, etc. Talk a little bit about how you think about poker and your mindset and all of that kind of stuff, and how things maybe have changed over the years and kind of where you are with that today.
Yeah, man, it has been quite a journey too. Sort of my background was both James and I really started to get serious about poker in college when, we would just play online and, started playing sit and goes and all this type of thing. And, when you're in college, it's a lot easier to kind of just like have only one priority. And I think that was pretty much what happened for me. It was just poker all day, every day. It was, anytime I had free time that wasn't allocated to, studies or something else, it was just like, I'm going to play or think or work on poker in some way, shape, or form. So it was, at the start, it was rather easy, I think, to kind of balance it all out because there was only one priority, and anything that I could get poker performance out of, I was inclined towards. What was your start like?
Very similar, because like you said, we both started playing seriously in college. And I agree with you. I spent like tons and tons of my time thinking about poker, and even like going to classes, which I didn't do necessarily as much as I should have maybe, but I remember spending a lot of that time either playing online during class or studying hands out very, very aggressively and doing the best I could with trying to do the math on a chunky laptop at the time. So there's a lot of focus on it. But you're 100% right. As life goes on and you pick up new responsibilities and your schedule shifts over time, it's a little more difficult to be as zoned in and high performance focused necessarily as life kind of comes up and continues coming up.
Yeah, I think, and I almost think that's like a universal thing kind of happening in poker right now. Because if you look at the highest echelons of the game, maybe there's a couple people who can really make like $1 million a year playing poker, doing some crazy stuff like playing in Macau or chasing the absolute highest MTTs or something like that. But it's probably not a very long list of people who can like really make consistently like $1 million a year. Maybe I'm even overestimating that at this point. I would say sort of like the staple, like really dedicated poker player is probably in the $300,000 a year range, I would estimate. And because of that, I think what you sort of necessarily see happen is that people tend to diversify the activities that they're doing, right? So they're creating content or creating courses or doing broadcasts, things like that. And basically, yeah, I mean, that's sort of the default now, is that you kind of have to be a bit split between, your actual poker productivity and your other business interests and things like that. And I think it's sort of the default. Even some of the best players, right, they leave the game because they just have bigger priorities or for whatever reason, there's just less opportunity. But it's still very, very profitable. So you want to keep your poker skills up and you want to have your business running and, maintain your job, your side incomes, whatever it is. That's a balance I feel like everyone's kind of dealing with at the moment.
100%. And that's before we start factoring in things like personal life and if you have family and all that kind of stuff. I mean, you're a single guy, you don't have to worry about it as much when it comes to wife, kids, and all that kind of fun stuff. But it's, that's a lot of time, effort, and energy and focus, and making sure the house isn't falling apart and relationships are staying strong. And all those hours that go into anything other than poker are obviously leaving less hours available for poker. So for most people listening to this, they're not playing poker full time, right? Poker is probably a profitable hobby or something they're interested in at the moment, a hobby they're exploring. So for someone who's approaching poker from that point of view, what kind of advice would you give them?
Yeah, well, I do think there's room for people to have different experiences, but I can say for me definitively throughout my entire career, basically, I view poker as a performance activity. It's something that I need to get in shape for, in a sense. Like, it's very hard for me to roll up after not playing for a month or something like that and do well and feel comfortable and all that type of stuff. And I think that's probably true for most people, even though, you know, you may take a lot of the knowledge with you. It takes a while to get used to like losing, getting in a bad beat, just putting in that amount of effort into an activity. And I would say, yeah, for me overall, pretty much everything that can impact my mood, my mental state, my health, all those things factor in for me at the table. Is it similar for you?
Very similar. And I'll add one other thing that I think is kind of gets overlooked a lot when we're talking about the mental side with poker, especially if you've been taking a break for a while and you're starting to come back or you're just starting to shake the rust off, is you have to get used to not only losing money and taking beats and all that kind of stuff, but also boredom, right? If you're playing live poker, live cash especially, like it can be pretty darn boring just because you're playing what 20 to 30 hands an hour. It's just action can seem very, very slow, especially if you're transitioning from playing a little bit more online. And even if you're playing online, I mean, if you're only playing a couple tables, you're not getting that much volume. Maybe you keep feeling distracted. You're like, I should just open up a YouTube video on the side. And then before you know it, like you're not focusing at all on the task at hand and you're just bored. You don't want to put in a lot of sessions. You don't want to make sessions very long because you just want to get it over with so you can get back to not feeling bored again. And I think there's something to be said for kind of looking at that part of it because nobody really seems to talk about that. But I think that's kind of a very important one when it comes to the mindset of poker.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. Like poker at its core is a recreational activity. That's what most people do with poker. That's probably the reason why many people think, the money they make from poker is more fun, right? Because it's like, well, I would have enjoyed going down to the casino anyways, or like doing some sort of gambling, and now I've been able to turn it into a winning activity. So you really have to look at your motivations and kind of like understand your own blueprint of like why you're there and why you're doing it. For myself, I can say very definitively I enjoy the competition, and that's just always been my motivation. It's like getting better and finding an edge and figuring things out. I get very excited about all that stuff. Putting in like lots and lots of volume is less interesting for me, and very similar, like you said, and managing the boredom of actually producing results off the back of the things that I've learned in the competition. So what's your motivation? I don't think I've ever asked you that.
It's changed over time, right? In the beginning, it was definitely like pure financial. And then I really enjoyed it as kind of a focused lens that I could help people learn through. And now I view it, and I think it's kind of always been in like my back pocket, the way that I viewed poker in general, is it's such a pure microcosm of real life. And like the skills you have to be a good poker player are the same skills that translate to like universal success in life, or at least I would say so based upon the way that I determine success. So I view it as working on the mental, working on the math, being technically focused, being able to handle losses, being able to handle the social element of stuff, being able to handle the self-motivation because I want to get better at something. Like, if you want to get good at poker, all the skill sets that are required for that will help you in many other facets of life. So I look at all the time I spend in poker as stuff that is translating into other areas, so I never feel that bored. I never feel like I'm wasting time because it's like, well, I get a little bit better here, and I don't necessarily know exactly where that skill is going to translate in my real life, but I know it's going to pop up somewhere, and I'm going to be grateful that I have it when I need it.
Hey everyone, this is just a quick reminder. If you need help getting started in poker, figuring out what to do, what ranges to play, we have Core available. Core is the most structured poker course that you can get. Literally walks you through everything you need to know from the ground up. Each concept, ranges, how all that works, how you need to think about that. Literally a step-by-step progression into making you essentially an expert poker player. And all that is available for just $5 to start, $5 a week after that. And yeah, I mean, it's what a beginner poker player would need. And we've spent the time to meticulously understand that. We have beginners who come in and ask questions, and we've integrated that, and those questions are available as well. So I think it's really the best thing that you could do to get started in poker. So if that sounds like the type of thing that you would like, please go to redchippoker.com/core. I think I can relate in that I kind of view I think I have different motivations from you, but like I kind of view like there's a portion of my life set aside basically for competing because I just enjoy it. You know, if it's not poker, it's going to be like a video game or some business thing, and I always have that, you know, 15 to 20 hours a week or whatever dedicated to just having some competition time because it's what makes me happy. And actually that's, I think for me, been one of the biggest learnings over the years is that I actually can also go over that amount. So if I'm trying to play, you know, 40 hours a week, like when I was professional, things like that, oftentimes I would go past the point of competition because I was so, I think I get very emotionally involved in a lot of the competition activities. Like it's enjoyable if it's intense. But if you have, for me, if I have too much intensity over a long period of time, if I'm doing 40 hours a week, I'm doing that for like, you know, a year straight or something like that, it's way, way too much. And so I've actually had to find a nice balance of like, okay, like I can have this competition time set aside. I can have improvement time that doesn't necessarily kind of factor into that. And so I kind of have to build that set of hours to fit my life and my energy level and my motivation levels. And I think that's something I don't hear a lot of people consider is just like, oh, like you may not be able to play great poker for, you know, 40 hours a week or 30 hours a week, like without maybe some excitement or a break or a vacation. And I think that's something that I've seen with the, you know, the best players that I know is that they all have a understanding of like where poker fits into their life and how much they can do it when they need a break. And a lot of people think you're just supposed to put in infinity hours, you know, once you make an hourly rate. I've seen that to be very problematic for some people.
I can totally agree with that for sure. And I think honestly, for most people listening, that's probably not as much of a concern. But I know there are some people that have started to get some success in the game. They're starting to find an hourly, and they're like, well, you know, what would it look like if I cut the job and just play this full time? And for that, I would definitely suggest doing it in a shorter burst rather than jumping right into it. Because if you've never done it before, if you've never like self managed at that level, both from a financial point of view, from a time point of view, from a motivation point of view, it can be quite tricky to find that balance. Like, very, very tricky. I think you and I have kind of been doing that forever, as far as I can tell. And it's a muscle, it gets stronger, but man, in the beginning, it can be very, very difficult. If nothing else, to find a life balance, whatever that means. But partially just to make sure you don't burn out and just throw yourself into oblivion, which I see a lot of poker players do, right? They fight very, very hard for maybe a year, maybe 2 years, and then they're just like so burnt out that by the time they finally come back in 6 months to a year, their brain's just gutted and they're onto something else.
I heard this really interesting idea that burnout is essentially when you've stopped emotionally perceiving the progress that your activity is generating. And that ended up being really true for me. And I think most activities that I've done is that, you know, like you said, when we were, you know, 18, 19 and playing online, it was like, you know, we were broke and had no money. And so like every dollar you made was just like incredibly significant. But for me, like right around, you know, like, oh, like I have a 6-figure net worth point, I was just like, well, this offers me all the utility that I could possibly get from money realistically. Cause I'm sort of I don't live a particularly fancy life. I don't really aspire to a particularly fancy life. And so it became very difficult for me to like push hard at that point because I would get burned out very quickly because I wasn't progressing in anything. And so I eventually solved that by kind of like diversifying activities, like getting into business, having other things that I would feel progress from. And then poker kind of became this, like, it's my competition outlet. I don't know. Can you relate to that?
I think I can to an extent. I mean,
You have a lot higher
yeah.
money interests, I think, than I do typically.
Well, I think personally, like you said, I mean, you are solo. You don't really aspire to live a very fancy life, and not that I necessarily aspire for a super fancy life either. But with kids, with wife, with trying to focus at least to some extent on generational wealth, like yeah, I definitely have to keep hustling and grinding to say the least. I don't see that stopping anytime
Yep.
soon.
I heard there was a comedian talking about this actually. He was just like talking about like, oh yeah, like the minute like I really emotionally processed the fact that I was having a kid, like the motivation just ramped up way, way beyond anything he'd ever experienced before. And I thought that was really interesting that like, oh yeah, like when you make that money and you know that's going to provide your kid with an opportunity or have be dedicated to something, it's a lot easier to be motivated to get up and grind and push yourself when things get hard. And I think for me, I very much have had to find that balance of just like, oh, like I love having this competitive outlet and it makes me feel very good, but I don't need to push myself that hard to do more of it than I sort of feel like naturally wanting to do. And if I do, actually, my results start to get very poor. So it's there's not even any point for me really pushing past my point of comfort at this point.
I think that makes total sense. And that's why I think this game is one of the reasons why it's so beautiful is people can play it with very, very different reasons, with very, very different goals, with very different thought processes wrapped around it. And the game still works and functions and everyone can still play at the same table regardless of goals. I absolutely love that part of this game. So you talked a little bit about some of the stuff you're doing or thinking about when it comes to trying to play your A game from more of the mindset and physical side. Could you delve into a little bit more of the things you're doing both during sessions, between sessions? Like what does that look like for you?
Yeah, well, I think the number one thing for me, and this is wrapped into how I view that competitive outlet and how that's built into my life. Right now, I just never play poker unless I feel A+ across the board. You know, my health is on point, my sleep was good last night, my diet was good that day, I'm feeling good and happy and all that type of stuff. I mean, for me, there's just no point in sitting down on the table when I don't feel good. So if I were to reverse engineer that for someone else, you know, I would just say, you know, all those things are going to affect you. If you're feeling off that day, if you had a fight with your significant other, if you know, are having some sort of issue in your life, whatever it is, like I can't imagine that not affecting my poker play, right? Whether that's, you know, making a mistake and playing too many hands or just missing information that I should have gleaned or whatever. I think everything factors in. I've never seen any evidence that that's not the case. I've heard anecdotes like, oh, this player has like incredible stamina and they can play forever. But when you actually ask those people, they're like, oh yeah, like after 4 hours into a session, like the quality deteriorates a lot. And so it's just like, I think it's kind of this myth that there's these players who just, they don't deteriorate. Like I think everyone does. And I don't know. Do you agree with that? Everyone deteriorates at some point?
100%. I think you're lying to yourself if you think you don't. So, I mean, I think back to some of my longest sessions, and I've played a couple that were more than 24 hours straight. And if you had asked me even at hour 12, hey, James, how are you playing right now? C minus, probably. But part of the thing is that could still be profitable, right? If you're playing in a really soft, easy game, like you might be able to completely drag your worst game with you and still eke out a win rate. And if that's what you want to do, cool. But I think it really does have to get factored into what the rest of your life is. So it's interesting. You don't want to play unless everything's kind of like perfect, right? Your body's right, your diet's right, your sleep's right. Totally understand that. I think my thought process is slightly different because the reason why I don't want to play when those things are off is because it increases the probability that if things go bad, and things will go bad a very large chunk of the time in this game, that I'm not going to handle it as well mentally, which unfortunately is then going to eke into other parts of my life. And I have to be very, very rigid there and not let things eke into my life that are then going to impact my family's life. Because if I'm just sitting there grumbling and mumbling and completely crappy at the dinner table, I'm not offering my children the best version of myself. I'm not being kind to my wife or as kind as I could be. I'm probably not caring about helping around the house quite as much for whatever reason. And all of these things are going to factor in over time. And because I care about quality of life a lot, like I have to be very careful about what I let in. So I think that's more of why I'm trying to be very careful with those things. I will play when I'm not in absolutely perfect environment. But if I get that feeling like, James, you're starting to get pissy, this is not going to be good for you, then I just kill the session immediately, be done, and move on with my life because I can't bring that back to the family.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I actually had a theory about you back in the day because James and I lived together for a while, and I got to see some of the downtimes for sure. So I'm curious, did you ever get more focused when you were like angry or feeling intense?
Occasionally, but it was not the default response to that.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. What about you?
I feel like there were some times where it was just like I remember vividly one person I was playing heads up, and I remember that like there would be back in the day in full tilt, there would kind of be these like grudge matches you could get with like a recreational player sometimes that would end up being like sometimes I would make, you know, double digit percentage of my year in one of those sessions, and I would just like try and play as many hours against that person in a short period of time as I could. And I remember sometimes like when one of those sessions would be going poorly, I would kind of be able to like lock in like, okay, I'm just like super focused on my plan. Like I'm angry, I'm emotionally upset, but I'm just gonna like push forward, push forward, push forward. And I could play like, those would be the only times I would ever really put in long hours. I remember a couple like 12-hour sessions and things like that. But yeah, those times were real interesting because like they were some of my biggest wins, but also some of my biggest losses. So it's really hard to say like, was that really a good idea at the end of the day? Because it would be like, you know, win 40 grand, lose 22 grand back was I think one of the most notable ones. And I remember I ended up having some sort of like crazy heads up Raz grudge match at like 100, 200.
I think I remember that one.
Yeah, that was a fun one. And mind you, I was not like an expert Raz player. It was just like someone was really bad, and I'd had some basic coaching, and I think we started at like 1020 too, which was the really funny part. Like I was just like experimenting and learning, and this guy really didn't understand how Raz went, and he was talking smack in chat. And he just like he wouldn't play me unless we went higher too. So I was like just trying to keep him down. And I think 100 or 200 Raz might have been the highest. Was on full tilt too. So it was like I don't remember. But it was very funny because it was like I would get very locked in, and those matches would be very stressful. And I kind of don't think in the long run they were worth it, because I just imagine like, you know, what was the opportunity cost of me playing, you know, 36 hours in you know 2.5 days or something like that. It's just like immense, because then I'm going to be out of commission for a long time and have to recover. And you know, for me, like, you know, getting like a $20,000 loss or something was like really emotionally difficult to deal with, even if I'd won the bunch of even if I was up. Sure. Overall, it's just like, you know,
I think that's that's the exact time where you have to call it, right? When even if you're up 80 and, you know, okay, if I lose 20 on this last session, like I'm not going to be super thrilled about it. Like as soon as that's part of the mental conversation you're having with yourself, it's probably time to quit. Just because is it really worthwhile at that point? Because like you said, you're already going to be exhausted anyway. So to throw exhaustion plus anger for however long it takes you to recuperate, like what's the point?
Yeah, totally. And I guess, you know, this type of thing is, I think, less common these days. I don't think, well, maybe online it's less common, but live, I think this is kind of part of the equation where like there is this balance where people are actually kind of also testing your stamina versus your peak performance, right? Because, you know, if I just log in for 2-hour sessions in a day, like I'm going to be able to play my A game the entire time. But, you know, like you said, there's no way I ever achieved anything near my peak at hour 12 or whatever. And I think people just have to be aware of that like, yeah, if you're compromising stamina, and I've heard this brought up actually in high stakes circles where it's like, people are aware of like how much you're letting yourself sleep, but you can kind of get away with more of it. And, you know, like in the Bobby's Room dynamic, like you'd see people try and stay up for, you know, crazy hours and keep playing, but then those same players would be like, oh, like once I started taking breaks and giving myself good sleep, like I noticed better results anyways, even though those games are, you know, short time, temporary games most of the time. So it's like, my general rule, I would say is to anyone, is that like anytime you can get more performance by making yourself healthier, it's almost always worth it. And the times you think you're compromising it for value or for EV, it's like, you got to be really certain you're locking that in.
Yeah. Especially if you're playing this as a hobby, playing this recreationally. Like, why sit there and think, okay, I need to put in 24 hours this weekend because I worked my 9 to 5 all week, and now I need to put in 24 hours over the weekend, and what, hope that everything's cool on Monday?
Hmm.
Like, did you even put in quality hours? Like, I'd rather you put in like 2 5-hour sessions each over the weekend, and that would be far better, almost certainly. Higher quality play, almost certainly. You're not going to be as burnt by the time you start Monday. Like, life is going to be so much better. Yes, you're going to miss volume for sure, but do you really need those extra hours right there? Like, what is that really doing for you? Especially if you're probably working with a lower edge, and thus your hours spent are going to be lower hourly rates, assuming they're even positive. Like, I think doing it occasionally can be fine. I like to press myself occasionally to do those kinds of things. But if you're doing that like regularly or even a couple times a month, I don't think I'd suggest that.
Yeah. I think there really is a dynamic where, like, poker tends to be these days, I would say, a younger person's activity. I think probably because of this. But I think one of the ways that you can capture that is that playing at the table can be a separate activity from studying. And I think that's something that's very important to remember, is that, like, studying doesn't have to be that intense. You can have exercises and focused study that really doesn't push you that hard. And just understanding that, like, okay, like, I may be able to reach this amount of hours playing, and then I can start diversifying if I really want to push harder and push further for a period of time. That's a really good way to go about it, in my opinion. And I think it's something that, as an older person, like, can give you a big advantage, is just like, okay, like, I may only have the stamina to play XYZ hours, but, like, if I can improve my three betting during this time, like, you can still make rapid progress to keep up with, the younger, higher stamina people.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. And it is interesting just because I, I almost feel like everything is a young person's
Hmm.
game. Just because young people have, well, if nothing else, probably more time available and probably more stamina and probably the ability to have a higher peak when it comes to peak performance. So, yeah, I guess at the trade off of less wisdom and less ego, I think as as you get a little bit older, a little bit wiser, your ego gets in check a little bit more, at least hopefully.
Yep.
So I think, yeah, if you're older and you haven't really been in like academia forever and study just takes a lot more out of you, whatever it is, like, just be soft with yourself. I don't think you have to beat yourself up because you don't have what the younger people do, either in time or energy, but you can still generate quite a win rate. If nothing else, think about all of the things that they're doing wrong and just spend your study time thinking about how you can capitalize on that. And there's heaps and heaps of edge available if you just spend whatever time you can thinking about that kind of stuff and actually doing a little bit of study towards it.
There was a fantastic interview I heard with it was one of the Chiefs tight ends, Tony Gonzalez. He talked about basically the dynamic in the NFL is just, the NFL is just brutal. Football's a brutal sport, and he, as a veteran, was able to kind of figure out, like, and leverage his knowledge in a completely physical environment where he would still have a significant advantage. And I think that's something that actually happens. If you see like 30-year-olds in the NFL, I mean, there's just no way you're comparable to your peak, as like a 23 to 25-year-old would be, right? In that type of game. But they are still able to, in a completely physical game, still leverage knowledge and wisdom and experience. And I think poker is really ripe for that, where, it's like, yeah, someone might be able to outgrind you on hours, but, like, if you have a better understanding of yourself, of your motivations, of, where poker fits in your life, your happiness, the things that keep you balanced, all that will play in, and you can demolish people who have, more stamina than you theoretically. So I think about that, just from my own experience, is just like, it's gotten easier as I got older, even though I have some of these disadvantages of, and I have less than probably most people, but, like, yeah, like, I can't focus as long. I'm more affected by things, but because I understand myself better and that motivation, like, I didn't even know I cared about competition and why I would get so frustrated when I lost and things like that. So when I was younger, I was just like, well, I just need to handle it better. and it was very it was very just nose to the grindstone, no wisdom, no precision, just like do it harder, push harder, push harder, push harder. And yeah, now I could just run circles around my 20-year-old self. So
For sure. And I think it's also really important to remember that it's not a competition on who has the most stamina more often than not. I mean, I suppose if you're playing multi-day events, tournaments and stuff like that, like, okay, fine, stamina becomes much more important. But shy of that, or if you're in like leaderboard races on some online sites, okay, fine, stamina factors into that. But other than that, like, who cares what anyone else is doing stamina wise? As long as you're not competing on like one of those very, very specific things, just focus on doing the best you can. And that's why I really do think like being able to understand your peak, hit peak more quickly, and stay there is going to be much, much better than just trying to focus on putting in 10 plus hour long sessions. I think that can be fine every now and then, but doing that as your baseline or thinking you have to live up to that expectation, like, why?
and I'll throw the MTT players a bone, because I do think, now I haven't personally done a lot of the MTTs because I just was never that interested. Although that may be changing. We'll see. Seems like there's a lot of opportunity in tournaments these days. What I would do is I do have long periods of starting a business and kicking projects off where, I will work 60 hours a week, 70 hours a week, sometimes historically even higher. And it's just sort of a necessity of getting the project off the ground or whatever. And what I will say is that when you're going to do that type of thing, I think it's essential to be totally prepared and ready for how all encompassing that will be throughout your life, right? So that is, if you have a significant other, having a discussion and letting them know that, hey, this is going to be a really difficult, challenging, and intense period. This is what you can expect. And making sure that, like, okay, if I'm going to go do this super intense thing, like, I'm not going to be eating a bunch of junk food during that time. I'm going to have all the other variables in my life set up so that I can be successful with this hard push, and I'm minimally damaging myself and minimally impacting my health and all those type of things that are going to play in a sort of marathon sprint push. And so if I were an MTT player, I would really be thinking about, how do I get totally ready for a tournament period of time and ready to put in those hours and totally fresh. And, I think I hear this stuff with like weightlifters and MMA where like there's this real tricky balance of like getting your skill set ready and fresh for the big performance, but also making sure your body is reset and fresh and all that type of thing. So I think with MMA fighters, they actually don't do a lot of hard training or fighting in the last week just so they get fully and totally recovered. And I would imagine there's probably a similar dynamic with poker where it's like, yeah, you want to be fresh on your skills and fresh on your knowledge and maybe playing a lot in the preceding months, but you don't necessarily want to be like pushing a ton of poker into those last couple days. And so just figuring out how that works for you and like really thinking about how do you set the stage for success, I think would be really critical for an MTT player thinking about performance.
100% agree with that. And I think it's a really, really good point about getting the rest of your life really lined up first. And every single time I'm about to undertake a big project, be it a book or some red chip thing or anything I'm doing on the side, I mean, the first thing I do is talk with my wife and I'm like, look, if I'm kind of like hardcore focused pretty much on this and mostly only this for like 2 months, how are you feeling about things? Okay, what if that's 3 months? What if it's 6? And we find that point where it's just like, nah, that's too long. Okay, that's fine. I'll dial back. I'll see if I can get it done in a shorter amount of time. But having that conversation early is really helpful. And anytime I go out to Vegas, if there's even a consideration of playing some WSOP events, obviously not in 2020 given Corona, but prior to that, I'd always kind of have that mental conversation with myself of, do I want to play tournaments? Is that something I want to fire off a rack of these things? Then I'll talk to my wife and be like, look, if I do, I might be really, really quiet for like 4 days in a row. How do you feel about that? And making sure that we're both on the same page and there's clear communication, because if there's going to be stress from your SO, I mean, you're going to feel that. And if you don't have that conversation early and you're just getting swept while you're also trying to perform at peak, and you're also trying to do it for a stamina period that you're probably not used to, you're really setting yourself up for failure. I mean, I can't tell you how many people you see in tournaments, you're like, there's no way. No way. This dude's not getting out of day one. If he ever makes it day two, never day three. It's just like, there's just no chance. They're not mentally prepared for that. They're not physically prepared for it, but definitely not mentally.
Yeah, you really have to plan for success, I think, if you're going to play a tournament and, making those successive days and things like that. It's like if you use all your energy on day one, how can you take it down? How can you win? It's going to be nearly impossible without getting very, very lucky, which certainly happens. um, but yeah, I think planning for success, and I think there's an element of that when you get into peak performance where it's like, I just remember there being such a huge difference when I just started thinking of myself as a successful, professional poker player, and the times when I was just like exploring and experimenting and all that type of stuff. It was just something about just my identity being associated with my performance totally changed how I thought and approached and was able to perform, I think. Did you experience that?
Step it out a little bit, and I'll see where I am with it.
Trying to think. So a really concrete example was just like, when I would make mistakes, what would happen after that? So I remember when I first started playing, it was just like, it was very free and like there was no big deal. Like if I made a mistake, like, I was playing with reasonable money and I was having a lot of success overall. I don't remember being stressed about it. But then as I became a professional, it was like mistakes were serious things that I had to take note of and, study after. And when I was going into a decision before I would, make a potential mistake, the level of seriousness and attention that I would give to that decision would go up and up and up. And I just remember that, like, being in a moment when you're a professional and you're making a decision, even just like for your daily average pot, where it's like, okay, this is a real decision I need to get right. I remember being like the intensity going like, okay, this is the moment, this is where I make my money. The level of seriousness I was giving that decision was very, very high compared to when I was more recreational.
That makes sense. Just kind of related but tangentially, do you consider yourself a perfectionist in real life?
Good question. I think I have some tendencies for sure. And I actually think it's more that the way I view it, I think it's important to give anything that I'm spending my time, my full attention and attempt to do it well. And I think I decided that was good for me. So for me, a perfectionist would be someone who experiences the negative consequences of that, where it's like they're overly detailed or they're unable to prioritize correctly because they're too focused on some minutia. So for me, my perfectionist tendencies are very positive at the moment, so I don't have any issues with them. But I've certainly been in situations where that wasn't the case. I remember early days poker, it was like so easy to beat these games. Worrying about someone exploiting you a little bit wasn't as productive, and I didn't feel good about it. But these days, I feel like I have it well underhand.
That's fair. I mean, I guess the reason why I ask is because when I think about times in my life where I've been way more perfectionist, and nowadays, actually curious, how do you view me as it comes to perfectionism?
Oh, good question. I'm not sure I have as complete a data set as I used to. I think you do a pretty good job prioritizing. I don't think there's anything that stands out to me immediately that says that, but I also don't have as good a feel for your pace these days. So your overall productivity. Fair. So I think that's really what you have to look at is like, if you look back at your, production and you say, oh man, I spent all this time on this, but I didn't spend enough time on this. To me, that's when there's a disparity. I guess for me, when I really some of my background is I left poker for a couple of years and went into consulting and flying around the world and going to boardrooms and that type of thing. For me, there was just like, that was the training ground for prioritization that I didn't really get from poker. Because poker, it was just like, I had 80 hours a week to just do whatever I needed to do in poker. It wasn't as important. And then in this consulting business, when I had, people working for me and on my team and I was accountable to people and all these projects I needed to work on, it was just like prioritization just became critical and essential. And I think after that point, I didn't really struggle as much with going over on something. So I don't know. How do you feel? It sounds like you have some questions around that. So maybe you can explore a little more.
Yeah. So I think before, when we were younger, I would definitely consider myself more perfectionist. And just like this thing would just eat at my head, just right in the back of my brain, and just, oh, that wasn't perfect? Cool. Now we're going to go absolutely destroy all the confidence you had today. And welcome to hell, buddy. Let's go grab some snacks. It's going to be a fun one. And that was probably years and years of that. And then eventually I just started loosening up on it because I recognized that that was just absolutely killing me. And I was finding myself deer in headlights more than I wanted to be. It's not that I wouldn't take a risk, but I would spend way too long trying to analyze and assess the risk. And by the time I was done analyzing it, the opportunity was gone. So I'm like, all right, well, we really got to stop doing this. This is just going to absolutely kill you. So now it's more, did I do my best? And obviously, it's a very, very personal, fairly subjective thing. So you have to be really, really self honest. And I have a lot of self conversations. I mean, I'm a massive introvert anyway, and a lot of my conversation is inside my head. And it's just like, all right, well, did you do your best? If not, okay, can you learn from it? Can you make better decisions going forward? And that was like one of the healthiest things that I started doing, is just asking myself that kind of question set. Essentially, it's okay to make mistakes. Did we learn from them? Can we utilize the information that we learned to make better decisions going forward? How can we identify this spot a little bit better going forward? And then rock and roll, right? That's why I don't play super, super long sessions anymore. I just know it's not going to be good for my life. And I've kind of had that conversation. And I used to play live sessions where my rule was, if I had two spots come up where I wasn't sure or I didn't really like my line, I would quit the session immediately. And essentially turned into things where I like would quit sessions after like 20 minutes. Like, that bet size was off by like $6. Good job, dum dum. Go home. You're done.
Yep.
And it's just like, oh, cool. So you're putting in no volume. You're not learning all that much. You're just quitting sessions a lot. And while that's a skill in and of itself, sure, it wasn't allowing me to grow and progress. It was just really, really capping and limiting me. So when I changed the mindset at least a little bit to just get oriented on being learning focused, that helped a tremendous amount.
I can very much relate to that experience of like having a rule about mistakes and quitting and not getting volume. And I think one of the things that happened for me as a younger man was my ego was heavily involved in these decisions. And actually, I think it still is to a degree because of the competition focus. But I seem to have a much healthier balance now where it's like I'm much more realistic, I think, about what I can and can't do and what my expectations are for myself. So when I was younger, it was just like, well, I should be perfect and never make a mistake and dominate everyone. And because I've decided I'm going to be the best, and that's what the best does. And obviously that's a completely unrealistic way to manage yourself. And, I just as an older, older 30s, but I just seem to have a much healthier balance where I make a mistake and I haven't been playing in a while. It's like, yeah, I mean, that makes sense, right? Like I'm not that clean on that spot. And, or I was playing too many tables and my concentration slipped, and I, that's a thing that happens. So, it's like, I don't get as frustrated. And I think that ego portion is a big thing for most people, is that like, it's very easy to associate what happens at the poker table with your ego. I remember there's this anecdote someone gave me where basically they talked about why poker was so popular in LA and California in general. And it was basically that like people went to the poker table to see their fortune. And, if the cards were going well and it was like, a good sign, and like, and if you weren't hitting your draws or whatever, it was a bad sign, and you were getting it was almost like spiritual. You were getting your fortune read. You were seeing and that makes a total sense. I think it's part of the draw of the activity is how personal poker decisions kind of feel. Like when you make a mistake in No Limit Hold'em or Parliament Omaha, it's like, and there goes your stack. It's like, that's kind of the fun of it. That's why most of us play the pot limit games more so than the limit games, right? So
True. It's It's funny. I mean, obviously, you know me when I was younger, and I was I wouldn't say super emotional on the good side of the spectrum, but I had some anger. I had some tilt for
Yeah.
sure. There was definitely some ego and endless complaining about the draws that I wasn't hitting. Definitely remember lots of that. But as I really started to change the mindset from how is my luck or what does my database look like, whatever, to am I making good decisions? And that's really like my thing. In fact, there are times when I will go check we have a bunch of different kind of income streams, and I will check one where when it's a good day, it's made like $4. But for whatever reason, I get really focused on that one because I'm like, I make good decisions to make that $4 today. So good job. And completely miss, obviously, the days or the income streams that are doing far, far better than that. And it's just because in my head, I probably needed a win right that moment. So I'm like, well, that's a good one because it's a proof point of made a good decision. Here's the result of that decision. Good to go. Poker's a little bit weird because you can make the good decision and not have a good result. So it's really getting into not looking at the result of the hand, but did you make the best decision you could? And when you're not sure about that, that's where you know, okay, that's something I need to go study. But by changing my mindset to that, it helped a tremendous amount. It helped in business, it helped in personal, it helped in poker, and everything just kind of like followed suit. Because I just stopped beating myself up over the result, which can so oftentimes be massively out of your control, and just did I make the best decision I could with the information I had right that moment? And if not, got work to do. If yes, cool. What can I utilize that same information and skill set for to make other decisions, either in life or personal or poker, whatever it be?
Yeah. I like that.
Excellent. So I think this was a pretty good chit chat. I know this is kind of one of those topics we could probably rattle on forever, at least a whole bunch of different things that we could think about and break through more so, both from the personal level and just all sorts of poker players in general. You have any kind of closing thoughts on kind of performance in poker?
I'd be really interested if, you're listening to this and you feel like there's an aspect of performance that you experience that we haven't talked about, and what are the biggest challenges you have. So hit us up on Twitter at Redchip Poker, and let us know if there's anything performance wise that you really need help with.
Awesome. Yeah, look forward to seeing what people type in. I'm sure there's plenty of different things that people are doing that hopefully work for them and hopefully will work for some other people in our audience as well. As always, thank you so much for listening today. Chris, thanks for your time. I'll see you back next week with a brand new episode. In the meantime, good luck out there and happy grinding.
And guys, before you head out, just a quick reminder, if you want our beginner poker course, it's redchippoker.com/core. $5 to start. You can basically get everything you need for that $5 if you hustle that week. Otherwise, just take your pace. It's only $5 a week. So check it out, redchippoker.com/core.